Good morning. I'm really sorry that I was unable to join you today on Monday the 3rd of October for the Project Management Bodies of Knowledge and Methodologies lecture. This is topic 9 on our Strategic Project Management course. As a very poor second substitute, what we've decided to do is for me to record this session for you. You'll realise that my voice is a bit croaky as I've tested positive for COVID, but nonetheless I will press on and I'll try not to cough too much during the session. Now this particular topic, it does two things. It builds upon what we were looking at in the first session, where we were looking at project management practice and what a project management person does, but it also encapsulates everything you've learned so far. The reason I didn't want to talk about bodies of knowledge and methodologies earlier was because we felt that you had to learn and get an appreciation of all the different areas, all the different tools, techniques, all the issues that face a project manager. And it was only then when this session would make a lot more sense and we could move forward. The other intention of this topic is that it does give you an indication for the future, so you might know how to move on in future to think about, should I be taking professional examinations for project management? Might it be useful to get accreditation as a Prince 2 practitioner in my work? So what we're going to look at who the professional bodies are. We're going to be looking at what is a methodology. We're going to be looking at bodies of knowledge, and we're going to reflect upon the use of those. But first of all, we're going to introduce this concept called the Project Management Office, the PMO. Now there are readings on today's topics which you can find out more from the two main textbooks. We have readings there from Mailer and Turner, and also from Larson and Gray. In fact, the readings from the textbooks are quite short. They don't sort of talk about it in any detail. But the main project management body of knowledge book that we'll be referring to is the PMI, the PMBOK guide, as it's called for shortening. It's an acronym, and that's now in its 7th edition. And that is available as an e-book to you through Chester Library, so you may want at some time to look through that, and I'll be discussing the structure of that for you. We've got 3 other very relevant journal articles which are very useful for this session. Hodgson and Patton looks at understanding the project manager. Pinto and Winch look at the past and future of the management of projects, and Wells looks at the questions: how effective are these project management methodologies? Apologies for my throat again. So a project management office, what do we mean by this thing, the PMO, which I indicated before? Well, first of all, it doesn't have to be a physical office. It can be a physical office, or it can refer to a central group of project management people, or it can be a virtual agency. The notion is that every organisation will have its own house style, its own adopted approach to project management, and this varies from one particular organisation to another. So what are we talking about when we're talking about a PMO? Well, this organisation, this grouping of people or virtual organisation, defines and maintains the standards for project management in an organisation. So what do these people do? And we normally talk about a PMO being in larger organisations. Well, they ensure the projects, in other words, the management of change projects in an organisation, is managed in a controlled and a consistent way. It looks at developing common standards and processes. It encourages, maybe enforces, the use of the standards and processes. In other words, the methodology, the approach by which people tackle projects in their organisation. They'll often manage resources for projects, and provide training and mentoring for project managers and teams. If you did want to have a quick explanation as to what PMO is and what it stands for, there is a very short, less than a minute video which is available to you on the Moodle site. So what we're saying from this is that organisations will often call their house style, their approach, the PMO. So the PMO is essentially the group of people or the organisation that really manages and controls centrally the projects and encourages or enforces a house style on people, so the projects are tackled in a common way with common tools, etc. Now moving on, we're looking now at the professional bodies for project management, and these are worldwide bodies which you can join up to. You can join up as a student member, or you can take professional qualifications to become qualified. Now, the largest of these organisations is the PMI, Project Management Institute, which has what they call chapters, or in other words, they have organisations in 170 different countries. They have offices and participants, so pretty much a global organisation. Having said that, the Association for Project Management, the APM, also is a major professional body. Again, you can take qualifications through this body to become a recognised project management practitioner. And both of these organisations also have what we call bodies of knowledge. In other words, they're books that indicate what the sort of knowledge is that people should have as project managers or members of teams. But don't think that they're the only organisations. You do have some specialist organisations as well. There's another organisation called the IPMA, which you're welcome to look into. The URL web links are shown there. And also, if you're into computing in the UK, then the British Computer Society has the IS Project Manager approach, and so some of the specialist areas in particular sectors or fields will have project management qualifications and approaches which you might want to tackle. Now, one of the exercises I would have run with you today, and I think Andy may have asked you to do this perhaps over lunch today, is to look at the websites of the PMI and the APM in particular, for you to investigate those websites, because they have a wealth of information, data, cases, interesting information for you to look at. So we asked you to explore who they were, what they do and what they offer, and what services are offered in your own particular country, because we're encouraging you to go to the country website of your own country. That's quite a useful exercise to do, because awareness of the professional bodies and what they offer in your parts of the world is really important if you're serious about becoming a project management professional going forward into the future. So what we're hoping is that you were able to do that exercise, and that's quite a fruitful exercise. What we'd like you to do perhaps in your assignment is demonstrate that you are aware of those organisations, and also that you're knowledgeable about what they offer wherever you work in the world. Project management is a profession where people are willing to share their experiences, are willing to talk through issues, are willing to provide help. So these bodies are really important, and project managers do rely quite heavily on the guidance, advice, and just the opportunity to engage in activities that are offered, because there is a danger as a project manager that you feel all alone in your organisation. But here's a chance to benchmark what you do and to look for developing your own practices. Okay, so let's move on and think about project management bodies of knowledge and methodologies. So what are they? Well, they provide a structured set of procedures, tools and techniques and rules and regulations that we can follow in project management. The most commonly used project management methodologies include PMBOK, I've said there is a methodology. It's actually a body of knowledge. It's not a prescribed single approach. And the PMBOK is important because it provides the core basis for the Project Management Institute's PMP qualification. That's the Project Management Practitioner, perhaps the most widespread and recognised project management qualification you can get. Now, before you think, yes, I want to jump in and get that qualification, it is reliant upon you having a number of years project management experience to actually be accepted onto that and to be recognised as a PMP practitioner. So I don't think if you're new to project management you can leap straight into that. It is a post-experience qualification. However, it's important to know now that that is available to you going forward, and you can join the PMI as a student member if you wish. Now, Prince 2 is a prescribed methodology, it's a prescribed approach, and it's got its origin in public sector. So whereas PMBOK provides you a wider body of knowledge, Prince 2 is a set routine of activities that you must follow when you're undertaking and managing a project. Okay, so we'll look through both of those, and we'll actually look through the APM body of knowledge as well while we're at it. Please note that there are other organisation specific bodies and methodologies. There are industry specific bodies as well, and we do have individual PMO, project management house styles. So different companies, you know, they may actually develop, particularly if they're a project based organisation, they'll produce their own sort of body of knowledge, and they'll have their own prescribed tools, techniques and procedures as to how you manage a project. Okay, so PMBOK stands for the Project Management Body of Knowledge. It was first established in 1987. First edition was published as a book, or the first edition was published as a book in 1996. And then really every 4 years, although one of these is 5 years, but every 4 years they issue the latest editions. And the latest edition is the 7th edition, published very recently, the 1st of August 2021. And actually the 7th edition indicated quite a few changes from the previous edition. So we'll look at the previous edition, then look at what's contained in the new edition, just so that you get a complete awareness. What does PMBOK do? It documents and standardises recognised project management information and practices into a codified approach. And essentially, if you're taking the PMP qualification, you're expected to read and absorb and take in cover to cover the knowledge contained in this publication, and then tackle exam essay based questions over a number of hours. So it is a traditional exam setting where you get this qualification. So let's look back at the previous edition, because I think it's quite useful to sort of think, or to demonstrate to you how much you've learned which sort of fits within the PMBOK guide. Well, the guide, the older edition, and I stress this is the 6th edition, the older edition, had what it called 10 knowledge areas. So project integration, project scope, time, cost and quality management, does it sound familiar? Corners of the triangle. Resources management, communications during projects, project risk, which you will have done this morning, project procurement, working with contractors and partners, and stakeholder management. Now, the reason I hold back this lecture till now is because these make more sense to you. You will look at each of those areas and think, yes, we've covered those. Those make sense in what Andy and Paul have delivered to us during this module. Those make perfect sense. But also they're also divided down, or the body of knowledge is divided down almost on a project life cycle basis, or more exactly on a project life cycle basis, saying that there's 5 process groups, as they call them. In other words, 5 main processes, what we called at the beginning stages. You know, I gave the simple idea of stages of planning, scheduling and control. Well, in PMBOK it's actually 5 stages: initiating the project, planning the project, executing the project, monitoring and controlling the project, and then closing the project, which was final topic 10. What we covered is included there. And in fact, if you look at that particular guide, what you find here, you've got those 5 process groups or stages across the top, and you've got the 10 knowledge areas down the side. You may say, why is it numbered 4 to 13? Well, that's because those are the chapter numbers in the PMBOK guide. But you will see that the initiating stage, key activities there in that column are 4.1, developing the project charter and identifying the stakeholders. You will see a lot of activity goes into the planning, project planning, and I've called it before planning and scheduling. And so you can start to see there it covers many of the things that we've looked at. Develop the project management plan overall, the project scope statement, notice project scope statement, key requirements of any project. So plan the scope management, collect the requirements, define the scope, and create the work breakdown structure. So you'll see the stuff that we did on work breakdown structures, WBS, a core here. I'm not going to run through all of those, but if you take a minute or two just to look at each of those are really saying these are all knowledge areas where the project manager must know these areas and have knowledge on them, in other words, in order to carry them out. Executing stage, once the project starts, how you actually go through executing it. Monitoring and controlling, coming through at the end, and then just the closing of the project at the end. I'm not going to spend too long on that. The reason why I like to show the old edition is that it does sort of plan out and show you that you have in fact covered many of these areas within the topics during this module. As I say though, this was updated and changed from the PMBOK guide 6th edition 2017 to the newer 7th edition. So what does the 7th edition look like? It's quite different in fact. There's introduction chapter and a chapter on value delivery systems, so an emphasis on value. But then it's based around this idea of 12 project delivery principles, the need for good stewardship, teamwork, stakeholder analysis, a focus on creating value, holistic and integrated thinking, leadership, tailoring of the approaches to your own situation and context, management of quality, how you handle complexity in the project, assessing opportunities and threats, your resilience and adaptability in the project, and how you manage change and change management, how you manage changes within the project as they are underway. So those are the 12 delivery principles, and that's their wording, not mine, it's their wording. But they also divide up the guide into what they call 8 performance domains. Performance is assessed in terms of how well the team worked, performance regarding stakeholders, performance in terms of managing the life cycle of the planning, how we deal with uncertainty, performance in terms of delivery performance, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's actually the structure. It's pretty much the chapters and sub-chapters, if you like, of the PMBOK guide. And as you can see, it is different from the earlier versions of PMBOK. The 7th edition is structured in that way, and so we can see that there are differences. So we do have this idea of 8 performance domains, and then the PMBOK 7 edition sheds the earlier versions 5 process groups, the stage-wise approach, and has replaced that with 12 new management standards. Wait a minute, let's get this right. Yes, there we are. That's a slide that I want just to sort of show you what those are again. So this PMBOK is essentially a book which tells you what the project management believe are the best practices and approaches and the current state of knowledge in all of these areas. If you read it cover to cover, they would argue it tells you everything you need to know being a project manager in any organisation and how to apply those. So clearly the PMP qualification, the professional qualification, tests you against these, against what's in the book. So essentially you have to get in your experience to be qualified to take the exams. You then have to run through and read through the whole book, normally taking part in a course which can have 50-60 hours of learning time attached to it in class, and then you whether that's in class or online, but then you take the written examination to actually pass and become a qualified PMP, project management practitioner. Once you've passed it, the qualification holds for a period of time. I think it's 3 or 4 years, and you are expected to be retested just to ensure that you still have those competencies and just to maintain your status. So that's PMBOK, and it's well worthwhile having a look at that. Just to say that the Association for Project Management, the APM, also has its own body of knowledge. So there is an alternative body of knowledge, also into its 7th edition, funnily enough. But it's structured around these areas. There's no need to get too worried about this. But it's one section is about setting up for success, then initiating the project, then preparing for change. As I say, project management is the operational management of any change project. So looking at how you sort of manage that, and then third body of area for knowledge is people and behaviours. That's both the stakeholders, leading your teams, and how you work professionally. And then the planning and managing deployment, defining the outputs, integrated planning, controlling deployment, so the project planning, scheduling and control side. Again, you can have a look at that in more detail by following the web link that's shown on the slide. Now those are bodies of knowledge, BoKs, BoKs, but we're going to look now at methodology, not a sort of big book containing all the knowledge you need to know, but a specific set of procedures to follow. Often containing a methodology will often contain a collection of templates to help you identify the project's vision and objectives. Often in methodologies, there's a sort of catalogue of case studies that go with it, so that you can sort of compare and contrast your experiences, or sort of look at projects you're engaged with and look at similar projects in the past. Methodologies, although they provide prescriptions, there is the opportunity in most to customise some aspects to your own circumstance. And the argument is that if people learn and train and develop and adopt a common methodology in an organisation, it gives you the opportunity to introduce consistent practices, but also good practices in your management of projects. The advantages of using a methodology, and as I say, most organisations will have their own house style, their own adopted approach and methodology, but it helps to provide direction to the project as a whole. It can help to reduce costs because a tried and trusted approach is understood by all team members. It can enable you savings in timescales because people aren't debating how it should be run, what should be developed, how we approach it. There's a sort of clear, accepted approach to projects at each step and stage. It can help to improve the quality of the project deliverables because people are focusing on the output and the outcomes and the deliverables rather than scratching their head thinking how should we be approaching and organising our project. We've already looked at one of these, in fact, the critical path method and critical path analysis, is part of a wider approach known as PERT, Program Evaluation and Review Technique, which was invented by a US company whilst working at Bose Allen Hamilton, whilst working with the US Navy on projects such as the original nuclear-powered submarines. So in fact, things like critical path method and PERT were first developed in the late 1950s, if you wanted a timescale on that, and sort of developed as a methodology, a way of sort of planning, organising, scheduling and controlling projects. So critical path method would be the engine, if you like, of the PERT approach. But PERT is wider than that because it looks at the wider use of resources. We've already said in some packages, in the precedence table, it's almost the additional columns that you add on in terms of times, in terms of resources, in terms of costs, and so on. So you can develop your PERT model to be more and more complex. You know, it does mean that you can do things such as not just looking at the most likely estimated time for finish. In this little normal distribution diagram here, it's showing for a project its length of the critical path. The most likely time estimate is 69 weeks, but there is in fact a probability of finishing you know, quicker than that and also slower than that. And what I've shown there is that whereas our critical path is 69 weeks, we may have a deadline of 72 weeks. So it's showing at the moment, the analysis is showing that the probability of taking 72 weeks or less is 81% almost. But there is a 19% probability based upon our some detailed model that the project may overrun beyond the deadline. So you know, it introduces interesting information that's very valuable to us as project managers. However, I'm going to focus on PRINCE2, and PRINCE2 stands for Projects in a Controlled Environment. It's a bit of a contrived acronym, isn't it? So why is it important? Well, it's a standard project methodology for UK government organisations and its partners. So if people are contracting or working with British government agencies, local government and central government, they are expected to fit within the PRINCE2 approach. But also it's now being adopted by many other organisations and internationally. So for example, it's the methodology of choice for the European Union and their various bodies. It's used by many companies. Yeah, it is probably more European focused in its usage, but it has spread to different parts of the world as well. Why is it called Project PRINCE2? It's because there was the original Prince, and then I think in the 90s they came out with a second version, hence PRINCE2, and it's stuck as PRINCE2 actually since then. It defines and categorises the project in terms of the planning documentation and the control and review in terms of the management of the project, its technical aspects and the quality control of the project. So as I've said before just now, revised extensively in 96, hence it's called PRINCE2. So it claims that it's focusing on justification and business processes. It has a clearly defined organisation process, if you like. They say organisation structure. I like to think of it as a clearly defined process. They argue it's suitable for the development of any project, and effectively it divides each project into manageable and controllable stages, and it's flexible enough to be taken for large scale projects or for smaller scale projects, although as some people will argue it seems a bit overly bureaucratic for small projects, the nature of the methodology, but nonetheless these are the claims that they make. It's essentially a prescribed process-based approach, which is providing you with an easily tailored and scalable method for the management of projects. And each process is defined with key inputs together with the objectives to be achieved and activities that need to be carried out. This is what it looks like. Essentially, you have the stages: pre-project stage, initiation stage. Then you can add in subsequent delivery stages, so it isn't just one stage. You might well have a series of stages within your project that you want to add there. Then obviously the final delivery stage, which involves closing the project, finishing it and closing it sensibly. Okay, so it looks at directing a project from the start up and directing the project and leading the project throughout. Looks at the management of the project, initiating it, managing the transition from one stage to the next, controlling the stages and so on, so project control and so on, and ensuring that major milestones, it says stage boundaries, but these are the major milestones in the project, are achieved and transitioned. And then also looking at managing the delivery. It's a bit confusing because I tend to talk about the delivery item as a project, as a product, but it essentially means managing the delivery of the project item. There's a video you can watch available on Moodle and on so please watch that video if you want to find out more about Prince 2. Now these are clearly very helpful and useful, but there are some criticisms of the notion of adopting one-size-fits-all bodies of knowledge and methodologies. Some people argue, is it really flex enough to suit all contexts? So some people working in the computer and IT and software industries say this is all too structured, slow, bureaucratic, if you like, in the approach, and we need to work differently for, so that's where the idea of agile projects comes in, trying to sort of build towards the final thing, cutting out what is seen as unnecessarily activities and management and bureaucracy, setting up meetings and all the rest, but actually trying to move quickly to the solution. And some of you might want to look up agile project management. There is a risk with agile project management because the idea is you don't hang around, you just get stuck in, you come up to the output of your project as quickly as possible, but it is a risk because sometimes, because you've missed parts out, you may have got to a solution quickly, but you may have actually taken some wrong turns along the way. But nonetheless, in the fast moving software industry, people would sort of look to try and do that. Remember, in the software industry you have the opportunity in many cases to add patches, updates and so on. It's not particularly recommended if you're building an aircraft as a project, for example, aircraft design, because you don't really have the opportunity to go back if there's a problem and rectify. So many products and many projects don't necessarily fit suitable, but some people would say we wouldn't want to sort of rely on these rather structured approaches because we need to move quicker towards a solution. Some people say they reflect their origins as well. Prince 2 in particular reflects public sector projects. The need has a very high emphasis on stakeholders and engagement and bringing together committees and project meetings to discuss progress, just to sort of justify progress that's going on. It doesn't always fit so well with private sector or with smaller projects, in fact. And that leads into the third point, that some people criticise it as these approaches being bureaucratic and a bit of an overkill for small projects. Do you really need to go through every step and stage and consideration if it's a very small project? That's why you need to tailor. I mean, they would respond by saying, yeah, but you have to be sensible and you have to tailor to your own needs. So there's a sort of interesting quote from ARAS People, a website. It's saying ARAS Project Management Benchmark Report covered a section of professional bodies in project management. They were interested in project management professionalism. Now, it's interesting because people think you have to be a qualified professional project manager, but they found that 54% of the project managers they looked at were not a member of any professional body. So you find that over half of the people with titles of project managers in organisations aren't actually formally qualified in the way. So, that works two ways, doesn't it? There's, first of all, should more be actually qualified? Should they just be moved into the position? But on the other hand, it says you don't have to be to manage projects within these organisations. Interesting, in that 54% of people, who weren't project management members. 30% said they were previously members, but they'd allowed their membership to lapse, mainly because they didn't feel they were getting enough out of their membership, and it was quite costly. So that's quite an interesting figure, isn't it? So it sets into context really what we've been covering today. Okay, so what we've covered are project management office, the professional bodies. We've looked at what is a project management methodology, and then we've looked at, first of all, the bodies of knowledge, the PMBOK and the APM version briefly, and then we looked through Prince 2 methodology and had some reflections on the use of those methodologies. So this finishes topic 9. For your portfolio assignments, what I think we really want is that you show some awareness and that you've learned from this particular topic, but also it'd be great if you can demonstrate that you've actually done a little bit of research, looked into these, and you can reflect, maybe if something you want to take up in future, you reflect, you know where to go to a body of knowledge to get more information. You're aware of what's going on in your part of the world, or any part of the world that you have access into materials, help, seminars and other programs that might be run locally to you. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry for the coughing through that session. I shall now go back and rest my throat, but all the best with the work, and I hope the assessments section goes well tomorrow, the assessment session. Next week we'll be having the Turnitin in support session, so there'll be plenty of opportunity for us during that online session. If I'm not clear of COVID by then, I should be able to run that session in any case, because it is an online session. Okay, thank you very much, and all the best with your assignment.